Have you ever stopped to imagine what it would be like if, out of nowhere, you heard God's voice telling you to leave your country, your family, your home, without even knowing exactly where you're going? That's the story of a man named Abraham, one of the most important names in the entire Bible, not just the Bible, but in all of human history. Abraham wasn't just a man of faith. It was the beginning of a people, the foundation of three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But before all that, he was just an ordinary man. Archaeology shows that Ur had libraries, temples, and sophisticated homes. It was a cultural and religious powerhouse. The Bible tells us that Abraham lived in a city called Ur of the Chaldeans, one of the richest and most advanced cities of ancient Mesopotamia on 2000 BC. A man who heard the voice of God and had the courage to obey. Abraham's story begins in Genesis chapter 12, but to truly understand its depth, we need to go back in time. And still he obeys. He leaves. With no GPS, no map, no certainty, just a promise. Ur was a polytheistic city, filled with idols and lunar gods. And it's in that environment, surrounded by idols and pagan traditions, that God speaks to one man and says, in Genesis 15, God makes a pact with Abraham using an ancient ritual cutting animals in two. Abraham doesn't. What does that mean? That the promise didn't depend on Abraham's strength or perfection, but on God's faithfulness? God was saying, I will be faithful, even if you fail. It sounds strange today, but in that culture it meant, if I break this covenant, let what happened to these animals happen to me. He doubted, tried to help God by having a child with Hagar, lied saying Sarah was his sister. But still, God didn't give up on him. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. In other words, the plan of salvation was already in God's heart in Abraham's time. Abraham crossed physical, spiritual, and cultural boundaries. He valued family, fought for Lot, interceded for Sodom, heard God when called to offer Isaac hand, trusted that even if he lost everything, God could bring it back. People who listen, trust, and walk with him. While we don't have a fossil of Abraham, we do have cultural patterns, kings' names, and rituals that match the biblical narrative. But about a God who walks with people even when they fail, even when they doubt, even when they fall short. He left behind the world's religious system and walked with a God who was personal, unique, and alive. Think about that for a second. Abraham had everything: security, status, a structured family, a stable life for that time. That God's blessing isn't just for us, but meant to bless others through us. And that the impossible is not a wall, but a stage for God's miracles. God makes him three promises: a land, a great offspring, and a blessing that would reach every family on earth. Paul says in Romans 4 that Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Before the law, before works, came faith. Three promises that seemed humanly impossible. He was already old. His wife Sarah was barren. The promised land was already inhabited by strong nations. He believed. Even when everything seemed impossible, even when it took years, even when he made mistakes. But this is where Abraham's greatness begins. Abraham lived in a time of absolute kings, terrifying gods, and little value for human life. But the God of Abraham didn't want blood rituals. He wanted relationship. He wanted covenant. And that covenant was sealed in a powerful way. But here's the amazing part. Only God passes between the pieces. And yes, Abraham failed, like all of us. Rabbinic tradition sees Abraham as the first true Hebrew, which means the one who crosses over. From an archaeological perspective, we do find evidence of cities and customs mentioned in Genesis. Theologically, Abraham is a turning point. He is the symbol of justification by faith. And this is so powerful that Jesus, in John 8, says that Abraham rejoiced to see his day. Abraham teaches us that faith is not the absence of fear, but the courage to obey even with fear. Culturally, Abraham broke paradigms. That's why he's called a friend of God, because God doesn't just want servants, he wants friends. The story of Abraham isn't just about a man who walked with God, and that same promise that reached Abraham can reach you. Maybe you're in a place of doubt, confusion, uncertainty, but God's voice still calls. Leave your comfort zone, your old life, and follow the path I will show you. And if you have the courage to obey them without seeing the full picture, you too will live promises bigger than anything you can imagine. Just like Abraham, maybe you won't see it all with your own eyes, but what God starts, he finishes. And he is faithful to fulfill every promise he makes.